Welcome back to mindSHIFT, a podcast about helping you shift your thinking so that you can access your natural gifts and talents that are already yours, so that you can live your best life now. You're one mind shift away. Hi, my name's Robin, and when I think about this second episode, about what I want to chat about, what came to my mind is, dude, I'm a dumbass. And what do I mean by that? So, like when I think about this idea of being able to shift my mindset, and I start to look at what I've learned in the science of neuro-linguistic programming, neurosemantics, in positive psychology, in the work that I've done in the workplace, as in learning and development and human resources, as a coach, as a trainer, as a speaker, and as a consultant to organizations, to multinationals, big companies and small companies, about behavior in practice and cultivating culture and leadership and management and supervision and all that. And I look back at what I've learned and what I know, I can see man, I made so many mistakes, but I didn't even see that I was making them. I was so caught up in my own strategy, in my own thinking styles, and my own thinking strategy. In coaching, we have a phrase, when the client is doing the problem in the chair. I've been trained to train, I've been trained to deliver trainings, and I'm coaching people, and I've done team building for years, even back from university days when I was trained as an AEL facilitator, adventure-related experiential learning. And we did amazing work, and I've had literally thousands of people come back and give me feedback about their experience, about the fun and the excitement in team building and outdoor stuff, and in the classroom, and my skill as a trainer, as a facilitator in the classroom, but also not just their experience, the external experience, their intrinsic experience, the learning that they've got in these different programs and interventions. Yet, I look back in the last couple of weeks, about the last couple of years, in reflecting for the last 20 years, and I can see how I was unable to see then my own thinking style, my own neurology, and how my neurology, and yes, in this podcast I'm going to talk a lot about me and the word I, because I want to take ownership of my thinking. And I invite you, as you hear my story and you hear the stories that I'll ground these ideas in, I invite you to try them on for yourself. I invite you to go, okay, so if that's what Robin is going through, or that was what Robin was experiencing, and that's what's happening in the scenario, what would it be for me? And if I try that on, what would I have thought? What would I be thinking and feeling and doing? But come back to my story. I was so caught up in my own neurology. So pause, what does that mean? My brain, you and I have a brain. If you're listening to this, you have a brain. And your brain is wired. Kind of like in the neurology, I think of some of these fancy diagrams we see in modern graphics today. And you have neurons and you have neural pathways, and they create these, traditionally we'd see them as what would be a neurons fire together, and it's like a predominant thinking style. And when your physical body has a response to a trigger, an external trigger, so something outside of yourself, perhaps it could be something simple as the wind blowing through a room, and you feel the wind blow on the skin of your hand or your arm or your face or your cheek, and the hairs on your skin, the follicles, that word, they, in the short version, they create a sequence of events that sends a message through your sensory inputs through your brain to tell your thinking capacity, oh, I feel the wind, I am hot, I am cold. And you create meaning, and then that creates an experience for you. But to slow all that down, in the neurology, in the wiring of your brain, in the wiring of my brain, I have predominant firings, I have predominant highways and pathways that have been shaped by my biology as well as by my response, my biological response to the environment around me. And because of the meanings I was making in those moments in my youth, 4 years old, 5 years old, through 7 to 13 years old, because of the meanings I made in my experiences with scenarios, both a physical scenario or how other people were reacting and responding and behaving towards me, And you do that many times over a period of time, that the meaning that you make in that moment becomes something of a belief. And that belief is an expression of this path, this highway, a sequence of neurons, a message chasing down a sequence of neurons in what's become quote unquote permanent or a fixed pathway. And one of these pathways, I'm simplifying it really a lot, one of these, how I see it, one of these pathways would be a thinking style. So I said I'm a dumbass. I'll give you an example. In this last couple of months, in the last, let's say 2 years, I've become so acutely aware how I have been a professional personalizer. What does that mean? So it doesn't matter what's happened in my life, I found a way to allow or to mistake what's happening in my life around me to say something about me, to mean something about me. Whether that could be something happening in the room. So perhaps, yeah, I'm in Southern Africa right now, recording this episode in Pretoria, and we still have load shedding. We have every day, somewhere during the day, there's going to be a demand management strategy that the power is going to go off. And for the longest time, something as simple as that. Now, this is a recent thing. So this is 2022, the last 2 years or so, we've had this load shedding phenomena take over our normal civil experience in South Africa. But 20 years ago, or 30 or 40 years ago, I was in grade school, and I would allow something happening in the classroom to have a similar effect. So someone would push me out of the queue. So standing in row to get into the classroom, someone would push me out of the queue. And perhaps it was intentional, perhaps it was not. I was really short and small back then, so perhaps they honestly didn't see me. But in that moment, I allowed that moment to mean that there's something wrong with me. Or I allowed that person's behavior to say that they were doing something towards me with intention. So today, just balancing these two stories, today, a lot of people I speak to, when the power goes off, they perceive that lack of electricity in that moment to be like a punishment or something bad happening to them. And they can't see what's happening just on a global perspective, but that's for another episode. And they allow that to say, yeah, you see, there's something wrong with me. This is aimed towards me. And I personalize that moment. So back in grade school, I would do the same. A boy would push me out of the queue, not intentionally, but because I'm small, maybe he didn't see me. Maybe he's rushing to get into class on time. And in that moment, because I'm so small and I'm so light, I'm easily pushed off my feet, right? And I land to the ground and maybe get hurt. And in that moment, with a fragile ego strength, I go, oh, that boy pushes me out of the way, and that must mean that I'm not valuable. There's something wrong with me, or I don't belong here. And then cascade that or stack that similar scenario, but packaged in so many different ways through my life. And perhaps you experience this as well. So something else happens, and it's easy to misinterpret that happening, that event, to say something about yourself. And perhaps it's something someone did, or perhaps it's a phrase someone says, and perhaps that phrase is said often enough as if it's enough to convince you that it's a truth, not a subjective truth, an objective truth, that there isn't another option. And every time you hear those words now say something, that you allow them to speak through your mind to your heart, to say something about you. What does that look like growing up? It looked like if I was struggling in an exam at university, I mistook the struggle to understand, like the fatigue, the mental fatigue of learning, oh, there's something wrong with me. Or if I didn't get the marks I was hoping, and I misinterpreted the question and I gave an answer that didn't get the marks, and I lost out on the method marks, oh, there's something wrong with me. Oh, I'm bad. Or if, fast track a couple of years, I'm facilitating a intervention, I'm doing a team build, and there's a lot of stuff happening, and it's high energy, high octane stuff, and we're dealing with some intense stuff. And if one of the delegates have an emotional fallout, so they're confronted with their own self, They're dealing with their own internal trauma, their internal chaos, and they externally vocalize that with frustration and anger and disappointment and sadness. I would easily mistake that behavior to say, oh, there's something wrong with me. I personalized that behavior to calibrate as a calibration about my value as a trainer, as a facilitator. Let's take this personal. So I'm divorced today, and in my past marriage, I did this as well. In misunderstanding the communication between myself and my partner, or myself and my kids, and mistaking what was happening in somebody else's reality, in my partner then's reality or my children's reality, and taking on what was going on in that moment and allowing it to say something about me. I don't know if you're getting this. Give me one more. So in more recent relatings, it's been fascinating to recognize actually nothing has to happen. Someone just has to say something, and how I've become proficient in my personalizing to then reach out and find something in what's been said, find something in the words that's been used, and then manipulate them and interpret that to mean something about me. So actually, I didn't need enemies. I didn't need people to hate on me. You know, as they say on social media, haters will hate. Oh no, I would find my own haters. I would find in a room full of friends, I found a way to find something that I could twist and point towards me and aim back at me in a uncomfortable, unhelpful, unresourceful, in not a creative way, not in a supportive way, in a destructive way, in a mentally and emotionally destructive way. Now I wonder if this is familiar for you. I wonder if this is resonating for you. So this is one of the first mind shifts that I've had to make in the last few years as leader. So let's start with as leader of self, to recognize, damn, I've been a dumbass. How many years have I been personalizing? How many different scenarios, from grade school into high school, into college, university, in my different roles, in my roles in sales, in supervision, in management, in my own business, as business owner and business leader. And I have to admit, even in my role as consultant, so bringing my profession, my expertise and my experience, and not recognizing how when giving feedback and when bringing life and bringing really powerful stuff to the table, allowing the reactions of other people in their own chaos, in their own journey, and personalizing it, taking it on. And then that's a long-winded story to give you an example of what personalizing looks like. But what do you do with it then? How do I stop the impact of that? Because what happens is when I personalize, and I've got all this negative energy, this unresourceful, unhelpful energy focused. And so when I use the word energy, it's unhelpful thinking strategies. And the thoughts that I hold on to, like where do you go when you think, when you're personalizing? The discomfort with myself, the shame I experience with myself, the discounting of myself, the negative benchmarking of myself, of my self-identity, of my self-worth, my self-esteem, my ego strength. When you do that really well, you whittle away at your own ego strength. I know I did. And as I've done that, I realize how, here's the point, that in that mindset, so when that was my set point, when personalizing was my set point of one of my predominant thinking strategies, I wasn't able to show up and just be me. I wasn't able to access the full extent of my gifts and talents, my natural potentials, and to be able to not just actualize myself and innocently and freely be a beautiful expression of me. I was unable to share some of those gifts and talents with the world around me. And here's the funny thing I realized not so long ago. Like, how dumbass is this? Even when I didn't recognize I was personalizing, so how do I put this across? There are moments, I have friends who have told me about moments when they remember me stepping into my genius. Perhaps you know these too. You've had these moments where people come and say, wow, that was awesome. I don't know how you did that. Like, that's the best I've seen you do that ever. Or, wow, that was just genius, man. The way that you said that, or the way that you fixed that problem, or the way that you showed up. That was spectacular, dude. Really cool. And I don't know about you, but when I step into that moment, I was so blind in my own personalizing that I didn't recognize my own genius. It's not that it didn't happen. It happened. There were people in the room, and today they'll come back and tell me, and I see one of those faces in my mind as I'm recording this, they'll tell me about that moment. They'll be able to recall, to recollect that moment, perhaps in a facilitation or a stage presentation I did or a coaching engagement. And when I go back there and I try to visit it from my perspective, I'm unable to access, I'm better now, I was unable to access that same moment from their perspective because I was caught in my own set points, in my mindset. And as I become aware of this tendency, this strategy of personalizing, of going, wow, okay, hold on, let me catch my thinking, let me be real time or consciously aware of how I'm thinking right now, and being able to separate self from other and self from the world around me, I'm able to personalize less. And as I'm able to do that, so managing time in the moment, in the present and into the future, I'm able to show up more efficiently, more effectively, or less incumbent. Or another way to put that is I'm able to just show up innocently, come to neutral, and from a neutral state, without negative meanings and unresourceful, unhelpful, destructive energy and destructive emotion, just remain neutral. I'm able to bring the best version of me as I am today, and then plus, and then more, and be positive. But more than that, and this is one of the gifts I want to share with you, is as I reflect with this newfound awareness of personalizing, I look back on some of the moments I've had in my past, I'm able to see, oh wow, okay, so my memory of that moment, so it's like a flashback, something can happen in this moment and a picture comes up in your mind, and in your mind you go back in time to that moment, to the picture frame of that moment. And what you experience, I don't know if it makes sense to you, what you experience is the emotion that you experienced in that moment. But from this point in time reality, I'm able to look back at that and see how I was personalizing. And from this moment, I'm able to do, so in coaching, we would call that a bit of timeline work. I'm able to go back and revisit that and go, okay, if there was another perspective there, if that's the personalizing I was doing, what would it have felt like from an emotion perspective? What emoting would I have done if I wasn't personalizing? And in that moment, I'm able to access, as if for the first time, to perhaps hallucinate or imagine or even recognize, wow, there was something else going on back then. That even right now in this moment, I can recognize, like, wow, back then, yes, I was doing the personalizing, I was doing the discounting. And I experienced a certain version myself. But when I look back from this place, I'm like, wow, there was an amazing version of me there too. And that allows me to soften my thinking of myself, about myself, from this moment. And as I think of who I am today, in this moment, as I record this message and I share this message in video with you, I'm able to see how that softens, that disarms that thing of the past, that version of me of the past. And in that disarming, it allows me to access something like a treasure chest of something beautiful for the present, for the now, and into my immediate future, what might become. So I hope that's been helpful in this episode. So talking about personalizing. So I don't know if you've done this. I mean, I look back and I go, man, dumbass. I honestly, if I'm vulnerable with you, I don't know of a single relationship, a physical, like a person to person, or a connection, a task a job that I've done, or a role that I've fulfilled, where in some degree or other I didn't personalize. Fortunately, as I become aware of this, so what does that mean is I'm learning to just slow things down and to make an identification, to distinguish myself from others and myself from the world around me. And in that identification of self, be able to separate what this from that, and me from them, or me from you. And as I'm able to do that, I can just be in my own frame. I can be present to who I am without measuring or calibrating or judging. And I can do the same for you. And I can do the same for others. And I can do the same for other moments. And as I do that, all of us, all of me is able to show up in that moment. And then as this becomes something of your awareness, I wonder if you can try that on and take this with you into your next moment. You don't have to personalize. Perhaps you had no idea how much you've been personalizing. And one of the ways you can stop this is just creating this sense of self and the separation of self, this identifying with everything around you and holding your frame. And when you do this, I wonder if you'll feel the freedom that I have, that it's like I can access the moment, the present, more readily, more easily, because there's less to worry about. There's less other stuff I'm trying to pull into this moment. I can just be here now. And even when I'm with you here now, I don't have to worry about you, which is not a I'm not worrying in the sense of honoring and concern. I bring all that. I bring my concern. I bring all the profession, all the intentions, all the positive stuff. I bring that. But I'm not confusing self with other and self with the world around me. And when I do that, it's like I create space. You can create space for more of you to show up. And I wonder what your world will feel like and look like and sound like when more of you gets to show up in the present moment, in the days and weeks to come. Awesome. I'd love to hear from you. What do you think? Does it make sense to you? How does this fit? And or maybe you can share in a DM, send me a direct message, perhaps on a it might be too much to share on the comments below, whether you're reading this or seeing this or watching or listening. But send me a DM on where you've most been personalizing and what kind of shift, if you take this on, what kind of shifts you're starting to see since you've heard this episode. Awesome. Thanks for listening. This is mindSHIFT, the podcast to help you shift your thinking so that you can access your natural gifts and talents, which you already have today, and live your best life now.